Thank you, everyone, students and alumni, for joining us today. We're so happy to have this conversation with alumni who are around the world. The partnership with this event is with our Brazil Gateways office. And my colleague Jane here will share about the Brazil Gateways. But we have some alumni today from College of Engineering and the Knowlton School of Architecture who at one point have worked abroad in Brazil and are now working domestically here in the US, or they are currently working in Brazil. So we're so happy. We have a great panel of alumni and a great group of students that are attending as well. So just before we get started, there is a Q&A chat, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom for all the attendees. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout. I have some questions that I have queued up already, and this is going to be a very sort of informal conversation. But students, please feel free to submit any questions that you have. I'll try to open up the questions to our group as a whole, but if you have a question for a certain alumni, just address your question to that individual. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it along to my colleague, Jane, who is going to give us an overview of the Brazil Gateways.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Aaron and team, for putting this event together. And thank you for the incredible Brazilian alumni for your availability today and engagement with Ohio State, and for everyone who's attending. I am Jane, director at the Ohio State Brazil Gateway, which is located in São Paulo. So when things get a little better with COVID-19, I hope to receive you all in our office. So our office was established in 2014, following the China Gateway in 2010 and the India Gateway in 2012. We focus on 4 key areas: students, alumni, research, and partnerships. I will give you now a bit more detail on each of these areas. So if you feel we might be helpful in any of them, you can reach out or you can let more people know about us. So in the student area, we help Ohio State students come to Brazil to be involved with Brazil through education abroad programs that we welcome here, or when we help faculty create education abroad programs, through internships, through research with our partner universities, cultural and language programs, and so on. But we also help Brazilians interested in going to Ohio State for undergraduate or graduate programs, like PhD or postdoctoral research, and internships as well. This is in the student area. Now, the second area, alumni. In the alumni area, we try to keep the Brazilian Buckeye family together through events, programming, and support to the newly created Alumni Club of Brazil. I'm really happy about it. And what I think is unique about Brazil is that we engage not only alumni, but also friends. Friends are folks who went for Ohio State for short-term opportunities, such as the postdoctoral research and internships I mentioned previously. We have a database of 1,300 alumni and friends all over Brazil and other countries. And then let's go to the research area. That's where we help connect Ohio State faculty with faculty in Brazilian institutions. So they do research together, apply for grants, and publish, and so on. We have very good connections with research foundations here in Brazil, and they really help us a lot in this initiative. And then the last key area we have is partnerships. So we help connect the Ohio State community with universities, of course, but also with companies, nonprofits, and government offices. So we can collaborate in a variety of activities, such as putting together executive education programs, offering internships for Ohio State students, welcoming education abroad programs, and sponsoring research. So there are many opportunities. And Ohio State has about 18 written agreements with such Brazilian institutions. So I guess with this global approach, we like to say that we serve as an embassy for Ohio State in Brazil, because we raise awareness about the university in the country, about its programs and research. We connect members of the Ohio State community with opportunities that further Ohio State's mission. And we offer support for folks at Ohio State and in Brazil that are interested in opportunities with each other. So you can see examples of what we do on our website, social media, and by monthly newsletter. I will share the link with you in the chat later on. And there we post testimonials from folks involved in any of those areas I mentioned. We share events and opportunities with the Brazilian community on campus. For example, we have a Brazilian Student Association on campus. So, and a lot more. So I will share soon. So thank you again and enjoy the event.
Thank you, Jane. And really the Gateways is quite the asset for not only campus, but for students. It really is a great resource. So thank you for sharing. So to kick it off then, I'd love for our alumni to go around and introduce themselves, state your current employer and your role, at what point you went to Ohio State, and also for those of you that are back here in the US, when was it in your career that you were in Brazil? So feel free, anyone can hop in to start.
I'll start. I'm Marcela DeLong. I went to Ohio State to Knowlton School of Architecture for my master's degree. That was back in 2008. I graduated in 2011. I did the 3-year program. And I currently work at Corgan in Dallas, Texas. And Corgan is a multi-sector architecture firm. The main sectors that we have here are aviation, which is airport work, and data centers, which is what I do. So I came to Corgan immediately after Ohio State, which I found out about them through the career fair that was held at Knowlton School of Architecture. So that's how I was interviewed and then hired subsequently. So that's me.
Okay, Matheus, you can go.
Volunteering me. Yeah, so hi everybody, my name is Matheus Scuta, or Matheus in Portuguese. I'm an alumni from 2017. I currently work at Ford Motor Company. I've been with them since my graduation, and I work in the analytics team, so I'm a data scientist product manager with them. And I worked in Brazil for an internship, actually, not a full-time, but I actually went there to work for Michelin, the tire company. And it was, I think, my sophomore year. But yeah, I've been here in Michigan representing the Buckeyes, so I'm glad to be here.
Okay, I'll go next. I'm Giancarlo Tasso. I'm the VP of Operations for a Portuguese-based company called Logoplaste. We make plastic bottles. We're worldwide, 72 plants throughout the world. We'll make bottles for all the products that you buy, Dannon, P&G, and so on. And I went to Ohio State in 1982 was my first degree, BS electrical engineering. And then in 85, my master's in electrical engineering. And after that, I went to work for GM right out of college. And from GM, I worked for Alcoa for 23 years. And they are the ones to send me to Brazil as an expat. And I lived in Brazil from 2007 to 2017, 10 years as an expat. And I worked for 3 different companies while I was there. And then I'm back here in the US working for Logoplaste.
So my name is Aline. I am now in Brazil in home office. and I got my PhD at Ohio State. I graduated last year, and then I came back here. And currently I am at Santa Catarina. It's a state in South. And so I'm waiting for my grant that's gonna come up next year. We had some delays with this pandemic, and then I'm gonna move to São Paulo, close to the Gateway, where I'm gonna start a postdoc grant. And I got my BS and Masters in Brazil before my PhD in Ohio State.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that introduction. I think it's so unique that we have just a diverse group of individuals here this evening, ranging from architecture to engineering to academia, and really across the globe, both here domestically and in Brazil. So I think this is a unique group that we have. So to start off, a lot of you have either worked abroad for a short period of time and now are back in the US, or from Brazil and came to Ohio State and went back to Brazil. What do you see sort of as the any advancements or trends in your respective field? How are you seeing it differ stateside versus what you saw in Brazil?
Well, I can answer that question. The tendency that I see in Brazil is for engineering students or engineering graduates, they tend to be more of a general studies. I mean, even if in electrical engineering, for example, they know a little bit about everything. And in the US, when you go to school here, you leave your, you leave here with a very specific field. You're the expert at left hand something. And, so it makes it completely different in application, so if you have to, and it's because of Brazil. Brazil has a lot of moving parts. So you need to be able to deal with all the situations, let's put it this way.
So I can go next. Academically speaking, architecture education in Brazil is like architecture in Brazil in general, is very modernist heavy and very practical and rational. Whereas in the United States, this was a very different experience for me at Knowlton, where it's a theory, what we call a theory heavy school. Which means that we're exploring form and shape in different ways that we do in Brazil. So it was very interesting difference in terms of academically speaking. And professionally speaking, I actually am on a project right now in Brazil, on a project team that is being designed by my firm, but in Brazil. And it's night and day in terms of construction systems, and altogether there's just, it's very hard to find we have a client that has a standard that we want to follow, and it's very hard to find the standards exactly the same, because we do roofing differently in Brazil, we do concrete a little differently in Brazil, waterproofing differently in Brazil. So it's been a really great learning experience after having worked here for 9 years to be able to use this project type as a learning experience there as well.
I would say, so I'm in the analytics field, and I started my career actually I'm an industrial and systems engineer. I think I forgot to mention that, but in an actual production setting. So helping facilities, it was Abbott Nutrition. They produce, some like Pediasure and Sure supplements. Mm-hmm. I feel in these very, like Lean Six Sigma theories and some very solid foundations of engineering, I think it's very on par. Both places we find, professionals that are as great as the most senior here in a plant. You can find it in Brazil. Now, when I migrated to the analytics field, which is something brand new, right? It's still a big word that a lot of companies are catching on to. I feel there is a big disparity, not like a Grand Canyon distance, but the United States, I think, they have a little bit more of a facility, or it's a little bit easier to adhere to new technologies, rather than in Brazil. It tends to be a little slower, at least to, start that inertia. So that's been my experience.
So I'll talk about the PhD, right? I got a PhD in the US, and I know a lot of people that got the PhD here. I think there is some difference in the time. The PhD in the US is longer because there is a lot of classes, and then that's as fundamental classes where you build the knowledge and then you do your research. And in Brazil, the PhD is shorter, like 3 or 4 years, while in US 4 to 5 years. And then you have less classes and you start with your research, which was good for me to have all these classes, because now for my postdoc, I can have a broader options besides what was my research topic. And I think I didn't mention, I am in material science and engineering PhD.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. You know, one of the, I think, top questions that students have when they're thinking about a career, whether it be domestically or abroad, is sort of leveraging their talents or leveraging their experiences. And I know in our office in Education Abroad, in the Office of International Affairs, we always talk about leveraging your experiences, whether it be a study abroad experience to leverage that, or perhaps an international course that you've taken here on campus to leverage that in terms of, you know, advancing your career. Could each of you talk about how you leveraged your talents to get where you are today?
I could start this one. I think a big skill set that I personally don't think a lot of universities in the world teach, or it's not, you know, something you actually can sit on a class for, that really propelled my career, was the ability to connect different parts of the moving puzzle that your job is, but bring in a component to it, right? Technology will evolve, whether you stand still or not. Companies are going to adapt, right? The society, there is growth. That's a natural process. But you as a professional being able to pick these parts, understand what's happening, and bring your team along, bring people around you, has been something that has been a differential, not only for me, but people that I know that, you know, are the C-level. That's what you hear in their stories. And bringing that human component and bridging that gap, right, of, oh, you don't understand this, don't be opposed to it. Here, let me explain you, so you can integrate that in your daily routine, right? I think that's a big difference maker, no matter where you are in the world or in what type of field.
I agree. I think that the personable personality of the Brazilian person is pretty important for my particular field. I know that we as a country tend to be friendly, and we like to help people as much as we can. And I feel like that has helped my career. That aspect of my personality has helped my career quite a bit, in the sense of pursuing clients and going to face-to-face meetings with with CEOs, or with different people, sometimes even being like the younger person in the room or the only female in the room. I think that part of the outgoing side of my personality kind of helps me with that. The other piece for architecture particularly is that we do have excellent education in Brazil as well for architecture, and we do things in a very specific way there. And it was nice to bring a kind of that problem solving thing that we have there to my practice. It helps a ton in the field that I'm in, and I think that it's definitely something that not everybody can bring to the table. So I do like to have that background brought in.
Okay, for me, again, I think Marcela's, the Brazilian, since I was born in Brazil, it's you have the personality to be friendly, to befriend people and ask questions, try to learn, be positive, and try to put yourself in a position where you can be of help. and and be at the right place at the right time. Go to career fairs, talk to the recruiters, ask questions, do the homework before. Don't show up there and ask something that has no relevance. So I think you have to put energy into whatever you want to accomplish so that you can be successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think I am in academia, but that's very fundamental. If you need to, the grant don't come to you. You need to ask professors. You need to talk to people. And if you know a lot of different professors, different research labs, different people that different works that you can connect. And this is a very international career. You can just do your PS, your master's, and your PhD in the same place. You need to go around and meet a lot of people, so you can go further in the field.
I have a question here, and I'm going to start off with Marcela, because I think you sort of alluded to it talking about your career in architecture. But the student asked, what is it like adapting to different architectural designs based on a country's style? And then to open it to our engineers, how do the engineering practices differ by country? So I'll start with you, Marcela, on that.
So on the architecture side, there are things that are different and there are things that are similar. The things that are similar that don't really vary from place to place in the world is that as an architect and urban designer in a way, you have to always look at context. You have to learn what your neighborhood is doing. You have to show to design something that fits within that context, right? But in terms of construction systems, which is the biggest difference, it is like a completely different deal. For example, just for this particular project, this client has a specific way that they like their buildings to look. And you can't just take that and be like, okay, make this happen in Brazil, because it doesn't fit with the neighborhood. There's no suppliers for certain things, or there are certain things that the Brazilians do differently than we do, not necessarily worse, just differently. So we have to be able to adapt. And I think for my particular field, which is data centers, and for those of you that don't know, and I only do this because a lot of people don't know what data centers are. I'm sorry if you do, but for those of you that don't know, data centers are buildings where servers are hosted, are basically stored, and it's basically a physical building of the cloud, right? So these buildings are they're more pragmatic and they're more straightforward than for example, a high-rise apartment building. So the Brazilian way of doing architecture, which is, it's very based on efficiency. It's very based on problem solving. All those things are fitting really well with the data center design. So it's a little bit of both. You still have to study the context. You still have to know how it fits within the city. You still have to understand what the neighborhood is. But at the same time, you have to understand that all the construction systems, or even if the construction system is the same, like the concrete precast, there'll still be some situations and detailing that is just done differently locally. So it's just a matter of learning from your partners back there in Brazil, and also to be flexible.
Okay. From my standpoint, I think overall the quality of the engineers in Brazil are excellent. I think they're just as capable as the ones in the US. But as Matheus was saying, the access to technology in the US is fantastic. You're working with the latest and greatest stuff. Even at Ohio State, and I was there in the late 70s, early 80s, the technology was phenomenal. The stuff that they had in the labs, working with the electoral science laboratories, they were doing all kinds of military stuff that was, it was just fantastic. So I think that's the advantage that, some people have if you went to school in US, is that you have access to a lot of new technology, a lot of leading edge technology. And, in Brazil, again, it's, as he was mentioning, it takes a little time to catch up.
Yep, second that. The quality of the engineer is, very good, both places, United States, Brazil. We have some fantastic institutions in Brazil too that some are, they lead engineering space in what they do. I would say also the systems itself, so like in architecture can vary a lot. I would say with multinational companies, they tend to standardize, right? It's like that McDonaldization of, piece of globalization that if I go, so I work at Ford, if I go to a plant here in the United States and I travel to Brazil or China and see the same plant, different product, I wouldn't feel lost, right? I would know exactly where the standard, board is, where the meetings occur, where the offices are, how the lines are, created or built. So the processes themselves, I don't think they change much, but it's more the culture around it, right? Example, you go to China and you have people that are only job. You go to the United States, 5 o'clock, everybody leaves because they have their family, they have, their lives. So it's, again, the people side of it, I think, changes rather than the systems are pretty standard across the world.
In terms of research, lab research, I think new as you're more independent, you have access to all these equipments and fence analysis. Whether in Brazil, you usually have a technician that will do most of the analysis for you. They require more training. I guess it's mostly because when something broke or something, the repair is more difficult here. So they are more careful. So it is good and not always good, because sometimes when I was in US, it was very interesting to actually do the handwork of all the analysis. You get to understand better your work. But yeah, I think that's the difference in lab work.
Matheus, you mentioned sort of the standardization and McDonaldization of plants and factories. And I would also sort of pose this to Giancarlo with your background. Do you think that standardization is a product of globalization of these multinational companies? Giancarlo, is that something that you saw, the standardization 15, 20 years ago, or would you say that that's something that's relatively new in the last decade?
No, I think this is company based. Companies like like the lean manufacturing process. You wanted to walk into any facility and everything be the same. You don't want everybody making their own standards or their own reinventing the wheel. That's a total waste of time. So if we have something that works, we make that the standard, and the standard becomes the company wide. So, I have 70 some plants worldwide. If I walked into any of their plants, they look exactly the same. They have the same number of people, same machines, because we buy the machines from the same manufacturers. So yeah, there might be some variations here and there because it's customer based, depending on the customer, how he wants certain things. But the majority, it's all standard. And even in the automotive, when I was in the automotive, it was the same thing. I set up plants in Mexico and Venezuela and Brazil, and we set up exactly the same. We scale it down. You can't have in Venezuela a plant that is as big as the one, say, in the US, but it functions exactly the same. And the more you standardize, the better you be, and it's easy to find, eliminate waste and improve your process.
Yeah, the reliability. And I would say you can actually see the trend in the industrial revolutions, right? So the first industrial revolution, everybody kind of created their own system, right? chaotic, but it was brand new, exciting. And the second one, and it was actually not attributing to Ford, but Henry Ford, right? He did the automation like the Charlie Chaplin movie, right? I forgot the name, but every workstation, right? You're doing one task. So that was the first round of standardization, making sure everything, all the processes are the same. You go to the third industrial revolution, right? First one was everything different. Second one is standard. What are you going to do in the third one? You're actually enhancing the second one. You put Lean Six Sigma initiatives on top of it, right? You have all these new technologies just to enhance the standardization process. And now we're in the fourth industrial revolution, right? With data analytics, IoT, machine learning, right? 5G. What we're doing, again, we're enhancing the standardization, making these processes even more reliable and, you know, the same quality across the entire world.
Fantastic. Thank you for that bit of a history lesson as well. So sort of going off of that, I think this is good. And this actually came out of our conversation we had last week with our architects and engineers in India, is this theme and idea of sustainability. And I think you're seeing that a lot here in the US, but oftentimes the US looks to other countries around the world as to how are they being sustainable and how can they sort of catch up to where the rest of the world is. So I'd love to hear different perspectives from all of you on sort of how you see sustainability in your role, and sort of where you see it trending based on where we are right now in 2020.
Okay, do you have 3 hours? No, just a second. But okay, so I make plastic bottles. So I'm always on the news because you walk around, you find bottles on the ground, so you think you're the biggest polluter. But a lot of our customers are already using recycled plastic in their bottles, 100% sometimes. There's legislation that prohibits food grade bottles to have recycled plastic. It has to be 100% pure, like yogurt, like some food products. But nowadays, there are recyclers. There are licensed to produce PCR, post-consumer regrind, that is food grade. So you're going to start seeing, even in the food products, recyclable plastics. The thing you have to take in consideration is only 3% of all the oil in the world is used to make plastic. I mean, 3%. But the bottle industry takes a beating because, like I said, you find those on the side of the road. But what happens to your car? Your car is heavily made of plastic. Your clothes are heavily made of plastic. Your tennis shoes, your shoes, nobody's saying anything about those industries, and they end up in landfills, junkyards. So I guess, my plea with people is that do the recycling. Look at the bottom of the bottles. They have numbers. The only one that cannot be recycled is number 7. Everything else can be recycled. So do your part, and we'll leave a better world.
I think it's a fascinating area to be, especially in the United States. So you mentioned, Aaron, that, United States are trying to mimic some other countries, right? And normally they point to the Nordic countries or some smaller European, right, that they've achieved carbon neutrality or they use bicycles every day, right? I think the big issue with that comparison is, we have to strive in that direction, but we can't copy or mimic their solution because their country is a fraction of the size of the United States, a fraction of the economy, a fraction of the complexity. So although it's great examples they've set, the United States doesn't really have a benchmark that would actually be very applicable for our use case. If you think about it, what are countries that are larger, right, in population and probably in volume of output? China, India, Brazil, Russia, United States, top 5. Those are the top 5 most pollutant countries, right? So there's not really a frame of reference on your peers next to you. So that's what makes it even more exciting, being in the United States. And I think it's the general consensus of the politicians and the population that we need to do change. So being here and, the horizon in front of you, and you can actually craft a great solution that you can affect 5 other major pollutants in the world right, which contribute for almost 60% of the emission or 50% of the emissions. That's huge. So I started a little bit in a bad or kind of a negative connotation, but not connotation, but a negative morbid scenario, but it evolved better.
So for us, for me as a data center architect, it's actually a very important theme for us because data centers, if you don't know, they use a lot of energy. They use a lot of electricity and they use a lot of water. So they use a lot of resources, and these resources are costly. So it's actually in the business interest of our client to reduce that dependency to those resources and try as much as we can to lower the amount of energy needed. So our data center projects are super efficient in terms of energy consumption. And in terms of architecture in general, the American Institute of Architects has a challenge right now. It's the AA 2030 challenge, which is basically a tracking challenge for data as in terms of energy consumptions for buildings. And the ultimate goal of the AIA is to get to a point where we're going to get to a net zero energy building. And we're obviously not there yet, but tracking the signatory firms of this agreement are big firms. They're the firms that are like the heavy, they do the bulk of the bigger projects here in the United States. So their commitment to showing their numbers and to providing that information to the public, that is already a big step in terms of getting to a net zero situation. So in architecture, energy consumption is one thing, but there's other things that in fact Brazil does even better than the United States does, which is ventilation, lighting, and all those other things. I think all of those things, especially now with COVID and with some of the wildfire issues that are going on, I think some clients and also some architects are starting to open and be more careful and be more attentive to that side of things as well, to make sure that we are putting less impact on the environment.
I guess this topic is essential for research. At least in US or in Brazil, you don't do research if it's gonna be worse in terms of sustainability. I work in corrosion. Both my projects for master's and PhD were related to sustainability. In my master's, we were developing a coating for steel that wouldn't use chromium 6, which is really toxic. And for my PhD, we were working with magnesium corrosion. So the idea is to use in cars and make it lighter, so you use less fuel and less CO2. So research is, I would say, at least in material science, almost all related. You must have at least something related to be better than make it worse.
Thank you all for your perspective on that. I think all of us in OIA, myself, Jane included, we want to create global citizens. We want our students to, by the time that they graduate and they walk to receive their diploma in this shoe, we hope that they are global citizens by the time that they leave Ohio State and they can have a positive impact in their career and in the world. How do you see that global citizenship? I guess, how should I phrase this? For students that are graduating or students that are right now here on campus, what advice would you give to them to become that global citizen so they can succeed in their respective career, whether it be academia, architecture, or engineering?
Anybody?
It's a deep question.
Yeah.
Maybe a few seconds to think about this one.
Well, since I've been out of school for a long time, I can say that, the world is global now. So you need to be connected what's going on. You know, companies, especially the big companies, they're in almost every continent. They're doing fantastic things. So the more you learn about them, the more you learn about current situation, political, related issues, it will make you more attractive to an employer. When you're talking to people that may speak another language other than, you know, your native language, that's a plus. You know, general culture. I think what I experienced is by being growing up in Brazil and then moving to the US was that people in Brazil seem to know a lot more about geography and general concepts. And my counterparts in the US were more, okay, I'm in the US, I know everything about the US, but we're not very connected to the outside of the country. Things have changed now, but I think that's one of the things. If you want to be successful, you need to be connected to what's going on, you know, and all, you know, technology, politics, you know, everything else that's going on in the world.
So to piggyback on that, I'm sorry, Matheus. To piggyback on that, I agree that the self-awareness that education brings you about your own limitations is kind of the main thing that you want to try to pursue, because if you are aware of the things that you don't know, of the backgrounds that you don't see, that is what is going to motivate you to be to understand and learn more. I also would say read and travel and find your field of expertise or your field of interest that you're interested in, and read about it from different perspectives. Here in the United States, folks tend to, the folks, for example, that work here in my office that are not from here, and myself included, we tend to assimilate fairly easily to the American culture, because the American culture is a very, it's very dominant in other places of the world as well. So it's very easy for me to assimilate into this culture. So it takes an effort, even from me, but especially from others that were born into this culture, to be able to kind of break down that wall and try to understand. For example, you know, this person that works with me is from Iran, and you know, what can I learn from her about this, and how do they do things differently there? And just remembering that the world is a little bigger than, you know, than what's around us, and understanding how much I can learn if I understand my limitations on some things. So definitely, and if you have the opportunity, definitely travel. I mean, that would be my main thing. I know that that's not something that everybody can just go up and do, but if you do have the opportunity, that's something that I think changes everything.
Yeah, I would second that. No matter where you go after you graduate, whether it's United States, no matter what company, you're gonna see somebody that's different than you, from a different country, right? The world is different than it was a few decades ago. My biggest advice is forget everything you see in the media, everything you see in social media, and do not assume, ask. There's no wrong questions, but it's bad to assume. That's my opinion. A simple example. Every time I say I'm from Brazil, some people immediately say, hola, hablas español? It's like, no, we don't speak Spanish in Brazil, we speak Portuguese. Nothing against the person, but every time I have to explain that, I said, if you ask me what language I speak and then we start speaking Portuguese or Spanish, it's so much different, right? So forget everything you see, whether it's a polarizing left, right, just come with a blank canvas and make, you know, no assumptions and just ask, and then paint your picture. Simple.
Yeah, and I would say, as coming from Brazil and going to study in the US, is that you need to be willing to change and accept that things are different, and be willing to take this as a good thing, and then adapt. And you can even find different things that you like, or different ways to do the same thing that are also good.
So we have a question that was submitted by a student, and I think it's very timely with the global pandemic that we are all seeing. And certainly I'm sure those that are in Brazil are seeing it, differently than how we're seeing it here in the US. But what are you seeing as the biggest impacts that COVID is having on international relationships in your respective field?
Well, working for a multinational company, I was going back to Europe maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Now I was only able to make one trip. So I guess everybody is being very careful, not a lot of travel, Zoom, Teams, we learn how to operate in a different situation. I think after we're done with COVID, a lot of office space is going to be given back to their landlords, because we definitely know that we don't need that much office space. In Illinois, where I work, we are limited to 25% occupation. So what's the other 75% doing? It's just, difference. As far as companies concerned, we have protocols. Everybody has to go through the protocol of getting temperatures, answering, questions. The companies are taking all kinds of precautions to make sure the employees are not exposed. We're cleaning the equipment, a lot. I never seen my office be cleaned so much. So it's going like this. So I think once we come out, it's hard to say what we'll look like, but it's going to be different, no doubt. Okay.
On our side, the immediate impact for us has been, construction material cost delays and projects being canceled. Those are the kind of right away impacts. From what he was saying just earlier, we are learning how to handle interactions and meetings all virtually, but there's definitely a missing out on the face-to-face value of being with the client and being with the other engineers and consultants and things like that, because those relationships are important to maintain. Those relationships are crucial for the profession. As a general note to that piece as well, the fact that we're doing a lot of things virtually and that some companies might not return to the office in the same numbers at all, that's also a big hit for architecture in general as a profession, because we're the ones designing corporate offices and things like that. We're designing airports, and that's also a big hit for that piece of the sector. So to me, the main thing that I've missed, it has been the face-to-face. I actually got to travel to Brazil just recently, so I got to meet the Brazilian partners that we have for this project that I've been working on, and to me that was night and day, having that chance to discuss with them that's outside of a structured meeting, and be able to tell jokes and go to lunch and have some pão de queijo on the table. To me that was a pretty fantastic experience, and I think that's going to be the biggest impact is going to be on relationships and on just workload in general. Obviously politically there's a whole different aspect of this, and honestly we can't really judge what the ultimate impact of this is going to be, because it's not, I don't think I can particularly grasp the magnitude of it yet, but that's what I've been seeing in my personal experience.
I've seen that it has strengthened international relationships. So you can't travel physically, but not a lot of people, unless you're in a very powerful spot in your company, you get to travel, left and right. So as the majority of the people in your company, right, you tend to get fixed to the 9 to 5, 8 to 5, right? But when you have peers in China, in India, other areas, that the time zone is different, right? Normally how it worked in the past is they try to fit their times to ours. So like in India, right, I have a developing team there, and they worked from, it was 10 a.m. their time until 9 p.m. So then they could fit at least 6 hours with us, which is crazy, right? Because you think about it, like, wow, you stay into the office until 10. But now with COVID, it's the opposite. We're actually meeting halfway. So my day sometimes starts at 6:30 a.m., but then they end early. So, and we have more time to talk, to chat, have that Zoom to Zoom face interaction, right? But I believe the local interactions have definitely weakened because I don't have to see the peers I constantly religiously saw every day, right? And little, water cooler talk or lunch talk doesn't exist anymore. So although we're distancing a little bit in the relationships that are close by, I believe we're strengthening in the very far away relationships.
I think for academia, there were a lot of corporations that were put on hold because of COVID. It was hard. And also a lot of conferences all conferences were canceled. And conferences are the main place where you can meet and learn what is being done, like on the edge of the technology. But at the same time, we got some online conference I attended to. It was an interesting experience. And I guess it's interesting because I could be in two conferences that I would never go otherwise, money-wise. And it was the time the jet lag was a problem because for me it was 4 a.m. the conference. I think that's the hard time of an online conference, but it was very interesting. So something good from this situation.
Jane, I'd also love to hear your perspective since you're working sort of as an arm of Ohio State in Brazil. I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
Sure. Well, a lot has changed since everything started. First of all, we cannot receive people at our offices anymore, not even folks that are in São Paulo. So actually the whole building is sort of closed. I go there once a month to get mail, and it looks like a zombie apocalypse thing. It's really scary to see. All travel has been canceled. I was supposed to be at Ohio State in March, supposed to be there in September, and it all was canceled. So the relationship that I usually build while I'm there with current students through events that I host when I'm there, with alumni that are still around campus in Columbus, we just couldn't do that. But we were able to adapt pretty quickly. Like Aline said, we got adapt. So pretty quickly to the virtual events and everything. And we actually had a lot of events that were open to a lot more people than that we could reach this time. So we had, for example, 14 webinars that were open to everyone. And we had about 500, 600 attendees. We had students as speakers, alumni as speakers. So it was a very interesting thing. And I think we are going to keep on doing that, even when COVID-19 is gone.
Well, I think you've all brought up unique points about COVID is that, while perhaps we're not fostering the same level of relationships with those that are close to us, we're able to engage. I think this is a perfect example, the fact that we're able to engage on this medium right now where we're all across the globe, and who's to say that this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID, that we were able to sort of reestablish these connections and allow students to see the globalness of Ohio State. So, I think I'm optimistic, but, I think it has brought some good that we've been able to engage in this manner with some of our international partners. And I want to be respectful, certainly, of time. But, one, I guess, final question I would pose is I think a lot of our students, maybe they've gone abroad and they know that they want to work internationally. Or Aline, in your scenario, they did their undergrad or master's at Ohio State and they want to go abroad for a terminal degree. what advice or tips would you have for our students that want to have that international career, that want to be in Brazil in 5 years, or that want to have some facet of an international career?
Oh, I think for academia, one thing that is important, either way, when I was going to US was important, and I think it would be very important for someone that wants to come here, is to have connections with professors. You can Google the university, you can Google the labs, you can read their work, you can search for papers, and you can email them. Most of them will be very open to discuss the possibilities, to discuss the grants that they might have, and you can learn about their research, what are they doing. You can even, Brazilians are very open, and you can even email students of these professors, and they will be very nice to tell you everything that you want to know. I think a connection, and yeah, put yourself out there and talk to people. It's very important.
Leverage your network. Everybody on this call, add everybody, in LinkedIn, you get, I don't know how many attendees we have, but you'll get at least a dozen, 2 dozen, right? And ask, put yourself out there. You already have the no, so why not ask already, right? So.
On my end, the advice that I would provide would be to look into the registration requirements. So some professions are heavily regulated in most countries. Architecture is one of them. Engineering is also another one. So, either in Brazil or here in the States or in Europe, and depending on where you go, those places all have stringent registration, sometimes testing, sometimes experience levels are required. Sometimes you have to pay certain fees. So these are all things that are important to know. This process can be lengthy. It can take years for you to become registered. So it has to be part of your plan if you want to maintain the same career that you started with.
What I can say is that, I worked for Alcoa, which was in the aluminum business. They had 350 plants in 65 countries. There was opportunities to go anywhere. Some places were not so nice, but some were very nice. Again, what you have to do is, if you can, learn a foreign language, okay? Even if it's the basics, because you're gonna show up someplace you can't say anything. I know it's very hard to learn Chinese, but you can pick up some words. You can join a club at OSU that you can get to know people from a certain nationality or several nationalities. I think there was an international office when I was there, so there's all kinds of opportunities. But you have to ask. What is your company doing overseas? Sometimes there is opportunities that you don't know anything about. If you start asking, when you go through your performance review at the end of the year, there's always a box there to say, what do you want to do? So put it in there. Hey, I would love to have an international assignment. And that's what happened to me. I kept pestering people about an international assignment. And guess what? It came up and then I had to go. Right. So you have to take the initiative to put out there what you want to do. People don't know, how can they figure out what you want to do with your career, where you want to go? I was an engineer, now I manage plants. So, again, it's a completely different field. But again, if I don't let people know what I like to do and where I want to go, my possibilities are not good. Okay.
I just wanted to add, use Ohio State's resources while you're studying at Ohio State. So you, like Marcela said, get the opportunity to travel. So Ohio State has education abroad programs that you can look for. Internships. Even now, we found 3 positions for virtual internships for Ohio State students in Brazilian companies. So there's so much going on. Use the gateways. Yes, reach out and ask what we can do to help you connect with the countries you're looking for. So that's it.
And certainly for all of our students that are attending, I see Jane put all the social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, as well as the website. So please follow the Brazil gateways. And also we have the India and China gateways as well. And all three are a fantastic resource. So certainly follow them on those respective social media outlets. And something else I'm going to do too for all of our attendees is drop in the Global Engineering Events webpage. And so this serves both our engineering and Knowlton students. We're going to be having a conversation just like this next week with our China Gateway. So we're hoping that you will join us. But on that webpage, you can also find all of the global events that we have in the college that we're promoting, whether it be education abroad, info sessions, or other events promoting intercultural competence within the College of Engineering. So with that, I just want to say thank you to our fantastic alumni who gave us an hour out of their evening to be with us today. I know I learned so much about all of your respective careers. And I think for me, it just gives me sort of that ambition to really see our students grow globally, to know that really there is no boundaries of where our students can go. And I think for those that are attending, you can see that all of these individuals were at one point in your shoes here at Ohio State, and they're now across the globe working in their respective career. So I hope that this serves as a bit of sort of hopefully ambition to continue globalizing your respective career. And that really does start here on campus. So hopefully you'll take an opportunity to partake in some of the resources that we have and to continue attending our events and hopefully also go abroad soon. So with that, just again, want to say thank you to our alumni. Really appreciate it. And thank you students for attending. And we hope that we will see you next week when we have this conversation again with our China Gateways office.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome.